Oh, please take the table
To the front,
up to the front,
please.
please. Thanks. So this is this is item 14.
11.
Excellent, great. Oh, well, kia ora everyone. Thanks very much for allowing us to come in and have a conversation with you today.
So who have we got?
My name's Daniel Betty, and I'm a board member from the Eastern Screen Alliance.
And I'm Derek Slade, also a member of the Eastern Screen Alliance.
And we're here today to kind of really talk to you about building the screen industry here in Hawke's Bay, and fundamentally asking the Regional Council to support us, not only with the development of funding, but also exploring how to build relationships with local iwi and others to ensure that we are able to get this happening off the ground. So, where am I? As an organisation, we wanted to show you our show reel. And as the show reel is showing here, I want to just kind of give you an indication and an overview of what it is and why it's important to develop our industry here. Internationally at the moment, the screen industry is in a highlight. Streaming services, Netflix, Disney, others are all approaching us weekly to get the industry here in New Zealand. We can see that the demand on content is huge. I think COVID has really shone a spotlight on New Zealand at the moment about what's happening, who we are, but also the government has shown priorities for the film industry, not only with Lord of the Rings and Avatar that are being shot here, but we have no space. Our studios are filled for the next 3 to 5 years with productions and major feature films, and so we can't quite keep up with the demand that's coming through. We believe that here in Hawke's Bay, we're prime position to be able to take the screen industry here to the next level. We have some of the most beautiful locations. We've got some of the most amazing, talented people. Our culture is at the heart of everything that we do, and our landscapes are totally untapped. We think that as an organisation, we have the opportunity to work not only with our councils and our people to bring this into the next level. So, what I would like to, we'll go to the next one, excuse me, is to sort of talk to you a little bit about what our vision is, and tell you a little bit about what it means to be a film-friendly region. What we want to do is we want to create a thriving screen production industry here in Hawke's Bay, and we want to develop the brand of our region as being a film-friendly environment. And as an organisation, Eastern Screen, what we do as a regional film office is that we are the first port of call for anyone that's coming into the area to develop a film. We look at it kind of like we capture and we create. So we are the body that work with them. We're a member of the national organisation RFONS, which is the Regional Film Office of New Zealand, and we work directly with New Zealand on Screen when there are any kind of indications of people that are coming into the area. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and we have done extensive research around different business cases, looking at how the setups are in other regions, and generally they are funded by councils, which feed into the development of the Regional Film Office. We specifically niche ourselves alongside the Economic Development Agency, as we see that it fits in alongside or works quite closely with tourism. basically, in a nutshell, what we do is we develop the relationships that are here on the ground so that if a film comes into our area, we can then create access for them. So what does it mean to be a film-friendly region? Well, internationally, when people are looking in, they're looking for things like stunning locations. We also offer a reverse season to the Northern Hemisphere, which means that they can extend their shoot periods over a long period of time. We also offer a variety of incentives and generous kind of support for most of the internationals coming in. And we've got really favourable exchange rates in relative to the US, the UK and others as well, which is really important. We're looked at in New Zealand as having some of the most flexible and expert crew internationally, and we offer a diverse kind of variety of options, not only as people, but also our facilities that we have here as well. What does it mean kind of regionally for us? Is that when people come to us as the first point of call, it's our job to be able to kind of go out and do the location scouting. We have to go out to the different environments and provide access for the film industry to be able to work in the different locations that we have. So that means that we would look after the permitting and the consent processes, ensuring that everything's done within what we wish to happen for our region throughout. We also look at ourselves as being the people that build the infrastructure here on the ground and support councils to work towards things like developing accommodation, working with local suppliers and others to build up partnerships so that everyone is involved in the process. We also are very well connected within the community around relationships, landowners, and others who can support us to go in for different locations as well. We see that the film industry is a fantastic way of boosting the local economy. We've already seen this with, as an example for Lord of the Rings, that is filming up in Auckland and Kumu Studios at the moment. When they go out to build their sets, they don't walk into the local tumus and buy 10 sheets of plywood. They buy 1,000. And so these type of things will start to roll back into our local economy. With this all in mind, we have a bit of a plan moving forward. Currently, we've been funded by the Hastings District Council, a small amount to help build up our alliance and develop a website as a shop front for international guests. New Zealand On Screen has also funded us a small amount as well, so that we can actually employ a talent scout to go out into the region and do photography, so that we can create a lookbook of different aspects of the region. And once this is sort of starting to be established, we're looking at establishing local industry partners, not only in accommodation, but also suppliers that can actually offer different types of benefits towards the industry. So why are we doing this now? And the reason is that we believe we're very close to securing an investor from Auckland to develop some production studios here in Hawke's Bay. We're this close. And this organisation has already invested about $700,000 into the development and research of their project. And they're currently working alongside both Auckland and Christchurch councils to develop studios there as well. They want to build here, and that's really important to know. We see that this will actually have such a huge flow-on effect for us within the region. It's going to increase industry jobs. We're going to have education and training providers like our local EIT and our Takatimu Performing Arts Schools, working alongside local films as well as our international partners. Our industry suppliers are going to benefit. Our accommodation partners And of course, when we have an international film which comes into our area, we have about 300 to 500 people working on this particular film. They will have to play after work as well. So that's also going to help with our hospitality and manaakitanga. We also see that we'll have to have a wide range of community events that will come through. When we're hosting the stars, like recently, we've had Benedict Cumberbatch here shooting The Power of the Dog, one of Jane Campion's film. He was staying out in Tiawonga, and I had the very fortunate experience of being able to invite him into Toi Toi, where I work in Hastings, and speak to a group of young people about his life and his experience. These types of things we want to start putting out there in the public domain and exploring that as well. Now, Derek and I have come here also today because, and I'm going to throw over to Derek here because Derek's organisation is the company that is the investor from Auckland that is looking to build the screen studios. So I just thought it was really important that we have him as well here with us.
Mystery guest.
Mystery guest,
Yeah.
right. Thank you, everybody. Yes, I'm actually from Hawke's Bay, but I work with some family members in Auckland, and we have a company which deals with renting and leasing film equipment to the industry. We would be the largest in probably the southern hemisphere, I suspect, the amount of gear that we have. So we are a reasonable player, and we were approached by Disney first, then Netflix, then ABC, and then Paramount, all asking for studio space in New Zealand. One of the issues we have in New Zealand, which is a fortunate position to be in, is that all our studios are booked. Lord of the Rings effectively have taken most of it, followed by Avatar, and so we're in that situation of not having the capacity to bring anybody else in. COVID hasn't helped, in so much as we can't bring anybody else in at the moment, but they are working towards changing that. So our role, we have been going hard at this for about the last 4 years. We've spent an enormous amount of money on developing a new type of product for which to build studios. It's the first of its kind in the world. We've done some tests with it, and it's worked incredibly well. The benefit really is that they're multiple use. So we can build a studio, and should the government decide to pull the rebate and the industry collapses, we can then turn around and use it effectively as a cool store. So they're incredibly quiet and incredibly well insulated. So as a business, we have developed this product, and we've looked at different regions with which to build some studios. Everyone's very keen on Auckland. No one can quite work out why, but Auckland seems to be the hot thing at the moment. So a lot of crew have moved to Auckland. Crew in New Zealand are very transient. They will go wherever the work is. So from that perspective, a lot of people have moved to Auckland, and productions seem to think that Auckland is close to everywhere if you don't know New Zealand very well. So we've been approached by a TEED up there to build some studios. That has proven to be a nightmare, and we have really struggled with it. But it's still on the table. We've also tried in Christchurch. Again, it's been a nightmare, and we were ready to throw in the towel, and we were approached by Ron Howard, actually, who wants to come here and film, and asked about some studios for a very, very specific project that he's got going. We looked at options of places that we could go, and we thought we'd give one last roll of the dice. And with that, through Sandra Hazelhurst at the Hastings District Council, the door opened a crack, and we managed to see an opportunity. So we are fairly confident that what we were wanting to build, we can do through Hastings District Council. As such, the big issue that we have, particularly with Hawke's Bay, is the severe lack of crew and infrastructure. We're talking 500 to 2,000 people that would come into Hawke's Bay for a film, depending on its size. That's a lot of accommodation to find if the crew aren't here. So we're trying to do a 3-year plan which will enable us to bring crew in, and then we dovetail that with a training scheme that we're working with EIT to implement, and we will slowly train and transition the locals and transfer of those skills, which is a nice thing to be able to do, and it's quite an easy process to do it. So that's our number one goal. In 3 years we will be almost fully sorted really, I suppose, locally for people and equipment and a place to film.
Look, thanks very much, Derek and Daniel. Look, I'm sure there'll be one or two questions around the table. Councillor Graham, do you want to lead out with?
I do. Yeah, I had a little bit of background on your endeavours here through the Mayor of Hastings and another party. It's really exciting if you can pull this off in Hawke's Bay. I think it'd be phenomenal for our region, for our young people and everybody here really. So I do wish you best endeavours. I always wondered why does the film industry, when it's so successful and everyone's watching Netflix and it's so competitive out there now and with all these other ones as well, why do you need government subsidies? Why does the film industry always ask for government subsidies?
I think it's part of the international kind of game, unfortunately. I think that's how it fits. There are probably a half a dozen countries which provide tax rebates, and it was back in the early 2000s that New Zealand decided to take up the tax exemption kind of status for that to entice films through. I think what we have to put into perspective here is that the films that are coming in, they have budgets in excess of between 60 and 200 million, depending on who the players actually are. And I think it's a really difficult one to answer, to be honest, but it's a very cutthroat industry. It's all contract based, and that is a huge part of it, which makes it very difficult. But that's why we feel that it's really important that there's a relationship between the studio element and a regional film office, so that we can ensure that the culture that gets established here in Hawke's Bay is what we want it to be, and also that we are able to work with our community to develop our own stories, our own productions, and we can utilise the skills that are coming in so that we can start to develop together. So I'm not really answering the question, sorry.
I think I did, but that's right. Can we, is there another?
I just got a question, and just in relation, I suppose, because there has been some pre-meetings before, and I suppose, and not with this sort of poo, but then obviously for Pahuwera, and I just take it that Toro Torti's designated me to lead those discussions in regards to the studio and that, and developing the partnership, but then the question was around employment and rangatahi, so I suppose that would be important. How do we, and you mentioned it, how do we form the relationship to put people into employment? Is Wairoa an option for a studio? Obviously some vacant buildings in that up there, and I think someone looked at that previously, so those would be the questions from a iwi perspective that would be coming, or I'd be coming back to yourself to ask, just so you're aware. And fully support for any business in Hawke's Bay that's going to generate employment in that, great option.
I think it's worthwhile noting that the studio itself, for New Zealand anyway, is actually not that important. People don't come to New Zealand to film in a studio, it's all location based. So the studio really is a place to come back to if the weather turns inclement, so you can run to somewhere to go and film. But the reality is most of what you do is location based. So we've met with Central Hawke's Bay, we're also meeting Wairoa District Council, and those are our regions that are close to us. So from there you could hub out of here, Hawke's Bay, and then go to some of those places, and you might be up there for 2, 3, 4 weeks or months or whatever. So you don't necessarily need a studio. They might have a warehouse to go to, that might be all they need, and they could be up there for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks quite easily. So it's not, the physical studio is not the key of why these people come here. They come here for being outdoors.
Now, we do need to roll through this.
Sure. Sorry.
Excuse the pun, but can we have Councillor Foss and then Councillor Ormsby?
Thanks. Just quickly, the story you tell is compelling, and yourself being here, looking as an alternative to Auckland, etc. That's fine, but it's a compelling story, so therefore probably got a compelling business proposition sitting not too far behind it, with the kind of the bookings, forward bookings. So what are the things that you might think may be particularly interested this council, who generally I'd say supportive of your endeavours and all those things, but And Hastings Council has been involved a little bit, resurrecting, I think, not recreating Spring Alliance, because I remember the Murphys were involved for a while. And then, so what are the barriers to successful something Hawke's Bay?
I think there's a few elements. One is that when it was Film Hawke's Bay, it never got funding. Two, we didn't have studios that were on the table at that particular time. I think that is a big part of the narrative that's with this. And I also think too that when Tessa Tiley and Gilly Lawrence, who Gilly is still involved with this, and the Murphys as well, were putting it through, the industry was very different. And I think it has shifted significantly since 15 years ago to now being one of the most important things that we're, kind of working towards. The use of, streaming services, our Netflix now has changed the game. Also, we could go as far to say that social media has also changed the game in how that we're actually starting to communicate. So it's a very different proposition now. And I think, as I was saying to Gilly yesterday in the supermarket, when we ran into each other, it was one of those very interesting kind of moments where I think the timing's right. I think now things have actually started to line up, and this is the first time that we've started to see that happen.
Councillor Ormsby.
Kia ora. Thanks, Daniel and Derek, for your presentation. If we can go back to the slide where you have almost your timeline of project
Sure.
milestones.
I can I? Oh, there we go.
Before then?
There we
Yep,
go.
that one. So just bouncing off Councillor Foss's question, when exactly, so you're talking to councils now, so that's
Correct.
where you're at? Okay, and at what point would you be coming back to us possibly to look at support?
Sure. So last week we finished a business case
Yeah.
with a proposition there. So I guess today was really about raising awareness and just trying to give you an overview of where we're up to. But we feel that potentially either working through Sandra and or to work directly here with the councillors, that we would be able to send through a business case within the next week. And then we can start having those conversations around where to from here.
Thanks, thanks, Daniel. Just one further question from
Just a quick one.
Councillor Lambert.
I'm from sunny Wairoa, so how many people do you actually have in your Screen Alliance right now? How many people are involved in the industry in Hawke's Bay right now?
We have currently over 250 members, and these members range from actors, writers, directors, in front of, behind the camera, grips, lighting, and so as well. So we have quite a large and significant number of people here in the region. And just to finish on that too, COVID has brought them all home. So actually, Tom Spurston, who's just finished Snowpiercer for Netflix, is back home. There's a number of people which just finished the Star Wars Mandalorian. They're all come back home. Mandalorian, sorry, yeah. So there's, it's really interesting. And once they've heard about this project, or they've, our membership has increased exponentially.
You know that Wairoa always has the Māori Film Festival every
Yes.
year. So there's a lot of interest in Wairoa.
I'd love to talk to you about that.
Look, let's many thanks for your presentation. It's been something I've been interested in for a while, and I think I'd like to get some sort of steer from my colleague Rick Barker, and Craig Foss is not here, as to whether we refer a further discussion to HBRIC. It sounds like HBRIC to me, Councillor. Have you got a view on that?
I suspect that it's going to be a challenging conversation for HBRIC, because the chairman of the Regional Council is talking about HBRIC delivering a steady stream of cash to the Regional Council. And these guys are talking about these guys are talking about a steady and reliable stream of cash going to them. So I think there's going to be a two-line struggle, and I guess the chair is going to be in a better position. So if they can figure out how we can make
Get around the chair.
make a 5% return minimum on a capital over a long period of time, well, I'd be interested in talking to them.
Touche,
Sure
well
of
done.
that.
Look,
I think you're looking for something quite different than that.
yeah. Despite your bucket of cold water, I wonder whether we could.
No, just a realism check. Just
Yes,
a realism
yeah, I
check.
appreciate
just the truth. It is the truth.
Nevertheless, I think there is a conversation to be had. Councillor Foss, have you got a view that we could look at this at HBRIC level and consider both the business case and investment opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I understand HBRIC's looked at a few opportunities, or looking at, and they are new opportunities that hadn't been thought of before. So it's just as worthy of consideration as some of the other things. It's a huge amount of work to be going, but I'm sure they take confidence that this council was acknowledges and supportive of. The hard part comes to, people writing cheques, etc., and ratepayers' money at risk, but worthy of a consideration.
Well, look, I'm sure Derek's business case will have a figure like 5% return to investors in it.
Gross.
Perhaps we could do that. So, look, we do need to, in the interest of moving on.
Thank you.
Many thanks for your presentation.
Cheers.
Very timely. I really enjoyed it. But I've got Councillor Grant.
Could I just say that I just think that it would be worthwhile having an informal offline conversation with a couple of people otherwise. I just would tell you what the deadlock would probably get over is, but I'm sure there's other conversation we have about what might be able to be done. But a formal council meeting is not the best place for that.
No, sure. Great. Thank you.
All right. Well, look, you're happy to move that recommendation to receive the
I'll
review
move
report.
that.
Yeah, thank you,
I'll
Councillor.
chair,
And
I'll
Councillor Graham will second. Those in favour of receiving that wonderful report will say aye.
All right.
And those against will say no. Thank you for your time.
You do
gentlemen.
well done today, Chair.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on quickly in the interest of time. We've got Lockie McGilvray here. Thank you, Lockie. Can you come to the front, please? And we'll move to agenda item 12. And we want a full explanation of what you've done with the money. And
Speaking was good, Neil.
We're talking agenda item 12. I'm sure you've read the paper. We'll take it as read, Lockie.
Thank you.
Unless you've got a very brief comment to make.
Thank you.
Well, I'm looking on that, so I've got my list of jobs here.
Do you want to councillors, are there any questions for Lockie while he's in the room here giving us his time around the drought relief recovery page? Councillor Foss has got a question for you.
Maybe, right, just quickly, how much is left in the pot?
Yeah,
And what are the intentions of that?
sure. Thanks, Craig. So to date, we've dealt with about 520 farmers and lifestylers who've received the funds. At this stage, we've distributed about $670,000 worth of the funds. Total funds received is just over, as you've seen in the paper, is just over $1 million. There was 15-odd thousand from Give a Little and 5,000 direct contribution to the mill funds from the likes of yourselves and the district councils and MPI. So that's just over $1 million. We expect we're going to have that underspent in the vicinity of about $167,000.
Left or left?
Which actually we're quite pleased about in terms of the Rural Advisory Group. There is some options on how we deal with that remaining funds. It's still, it's certainly not hardwired, that number yet. We get into 25,000 with $1,000 worth of applications a week coming through, but we expect it to taper off. So some of the things that we'd like to discuss with the likes of yourselves and the mayors and the government is what we're going to do with that remaining funds. And to us, our thinking is that we've had 13 major droughts since 1900. four of the worst have been in the last 20 years. We're going to get an accelerating amount of droughts coming through. So we've had a doubling in the frequency in the last 20 years. That could double again going forward. So we need to build in drought resilience and understand some of the discussions that you've had this morning was about water security. There's a difference between resilience and proofing. Resilience is in the heads of the people involved, and so what we would like to do is communicate with farmers and lifestylers about building resilience into their systems. You know, you never want to waste a good crisis. We've had an absolute humdinger, and why people are open to and more receptive to ideas. We would like to use this time to build resilience. The drought, and you've probably heard me say before, is in three stages. The first stage is the one that everybody recognises when it's dry, there's soil moisture deficit. There's a lot of empathy for the farmers, and it's when we started getting people offering assistance from the broader community. The second stage we're just leaving, which is when you're working through the direct consequences of the drought. And in this case, it was going into the winter with very little feed, lack of funds available for buying feed, and the Merrill Fund came into a massive assistance then. The third stage is when we're emerging from those immediate consequences of the drought, and we're trying to get business back to usual. And that's an ideal time for us to start to speak to people to get them to thinking about how they can farm differently to what they've done. In terms of the RAG strategy, which was we wanted to get everybody off the park. We wanted to get everybody and as much as their stock through the drought as possible. And to date, we've lost no one. And that's in no small part to the contribution that this council has put in, not just in monetary terms, but in the massive support that we've had from the staff. We're in a vulnerable stage still going through as the farmers pick up the pieces. And so we've got to be subtle and very, very smart in terms of how we communicate with them. So where I'm going is we need a strategy and that we develop jointly about how we can educate farmers and how we can build resilience into their minds, and that goes through into their farm plans from there. And that's where I think we could use any surplus funds.
Chair.
Sorry, my apologies. Question from Councillor.
Kia ora. Thanks, Lockie, for your explanation and perspective, especially around the underspend. The paper I have in front of me, it talks about a possibility of, so this is from Ian,
Yes.
200,000,
Yes.
possibly around
Yes,
that,
yes,
you know,
yes,
by the
yes.
end date. It also alludes to that our contribution has been 20%.
Correct.
Yep. So that's around possibly $40,000,
Correct.
you know, left from our share.
Yes.
And just so that we can talk about what happened with our resolution when gifting from the emergency fund, that we resolved to set the criteria, and then for reasons that I understand, that approval didn't come back to this council. It went through another iteration of the fund's criteria, and so now we sort of have this paper, and we now have an opportunity to look at what can be done with the remainder at the end of the fund's period.
Yes.
So that's something that I think we need to discuss and have a paper brought back to us around what those options could be, with the remaining around $40,000, including what you've suggested. But I think that's probably something that we need to address as a council within a committee forum, knowing that one option could be the one that you've put on the table.
Yep.
But I think we need to clean house first around what that looks like,
Yep.
and come back.
May I make a comment on that?
Mm-hmm.
Given that there's a number of parties that put contributions in. It would be a lot tidier from my point of view if there was a common direction about where they wanted to go,
Yeah,
rather than a piecemeal approach.
yeah, that's right. But I feel more comfortable that we have a bit
I
of
understand
control.
that totally. It's yep.
So we will note that perhaps when we move the recommendation, the note to have that further discussion with Councillor.
Thank you.
Line up of the three here. Next.
Thank you, that Lucky. I really appreciate that. Just, you went over some figures very quickly. I like figures. How many farmers and how many lifestyles was involved?
You're talking about total numbers or the numbers we supported? Sorry?
Numbers you supported.
We're talking 520 that had direct association with the Merrill Fund. We think we've probably touched a greater number than that by the communications that we've had, advice we've had. That's obviously touched everybody. And the Rural Support Trust, which we're working alongside, have dealt with people as well. Over 600.
But you gave me a split of farmers, lifestylers when you ran through. Can you repeat those figures, please?
520 lifestylers and farmers. I haven't got the breakdown on top of my head.
Oh, you didn't. I thought you did break them down.
I've got some numbers in front of me, but
Say them before.
no, I didn't.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, once again, Lockie and the team, you've done a fantastic job. You know, it's been tough up there, and I spent quite a bit of time in war sheds when they were gathering together, and it was dire out there. But when the RAG was mentioned, people could really feel that there was support there for them if they needed to. Now, my question really is, and I believe that you guys have been very even-handed, and no real questions asked as to who got support and who didn't get support. But have you taken stock, and it's something that Will Foley, Councillor Foley brought to my attention, is there a pattern that we actually, through this fund, can identify where some of the issues are, where we maybe quickly can get our finger on the pulse, and actually, when we do the drought resilience work and start that work, whether we can delve into them and get to those people a lot quicker than just doing a broad brush. So my question is there data developed through the Merrill Fund that we actually can learn from to actually solve the issue sooner if it may occur again?
What we did, but outside of the Merrill Fund, was we developed a geospatial database, and we surveyed as many farmers we possibly could, and we got them to identify what their issues were, and so that gave us an idea about where the issues were and how to target them. It was fairly broad in terms that there was only about 5 questions asked, although each conversation seemed to take about an hour, and so it was quite slow progress because all the other concerns came out. That's been noted. That data is owned by the Rural Support Trust rather than anybody else, and we did that purposefully because it's very confidential information in some situations, so we can get the metadata but not the specific data. So that'll give us a general steer, but it won't answer all your questions, I'm afraid, because it wasn't specific enough. Sorry.
All right. Look, I'll take one from Martin, and then I'll ask Councillor
wind
Foley
up.
to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Thanks, Lockie. Again, echo what Councillor Van Beek just shared to get to the point. There's been a question mark over rate of uptake. My first question, I've got 2, is has this been valued? What would it have been like without this fund on the coal face or the paddock face, do you think?
Yeah, we have put some values around, and I actually can't give you the top of my head. I can give you some broad answers, but I hate to give you something specific. We'd calculated that we were going to be short of...
No, I mean, sorry, I don't mean a number. I mean, has this been appreciated by farmers? Has it been useful? Has it been
yeah,
helped?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Your staff has received dozens of emails, and I mean dozens, of farmers writing in very emotional emails saying their thank you to what's been done. The fact that we've got through to this stage and we've lost no one is testament to the work that's happened, not by just ourselves, but the collective community response that we've got everybody through. And I don't think we can place a value on that.
Thank you. That's answered that question
That's a good
well.
answer. Thank you.
The follow-up was, one of the options, I don't know, there's reference to this fund closing or something like that. I don't know if you've looked at the weather lately, but if I was a farmer, I'd be thinking it's double drought. You know, is there some value here from your point of view in keeping the residue for next summer possibly, or is that something that would be in your mind?
Yep. Will's in the epicentre probably. It is dry out there. We're lower now in soil moisture deficits than we were this time last year. And talking to your regional council scientists, the models are very variable. One is saying we're going to get some rain, the other's saying, hey, we're going to run smack into another drought period. So we don't know. We haven't got the feed reserves that we had last year in terms of silage pits and all those sorts of things. And we've got people who are weak in the knees. So we're in a very vulnerable position if we go into another drought.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Foley, can you either move and comment or both?
Yeah, sure. I'll move the recommendation that we receive this report. I'd just like to... Sorry. Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge Lockie's work around this. So we know a lot of our own staff have put a lot of time and effort into this, but no one beats Lockie for his time, his commitment to this role, and we saw that recognised in the Civic Awards in Hastings this week. So, yeah, I'd just like to say on behalf of the whole Hawke's Bay community, not just the farmers, but, you know, a big thank you to Lockie, and yeah, let's not dwell on the summer approaching us yet, but yeah, let's hope we do get some rain soon.
Great, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Ormsby, did you have a comment? No? Well, look, just we'll follow up and echo your the comments from Councillor Foley, is that a job very well done. Anyone that's got livestock and has got nowhere to go with them with no feed, that's a really emotionally charged environment and enough to send even strong people over the top around that. So I'm certain that we've had an impact at that level. One of the things, though, that we need to consider as a council, I think, is we've handed out 200k for the project. We did it on certain terms. I think we do need a discussion as to say, how do we want that residual to be dealt with? And I think it's deserving another discussion. Hopefully by the time this recommendation gets back to council, we'll have formulated a position that can give you some direction. So thank you for that. I'll put the motion. Those in favour of receiving the report, say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. Thanks, Lockie. Okay. Yeah, all the best.
Yes, Lockie.
Next year, I think we get Andy in up.
Yes. So look, if I can turn you to
What page are you up to now?
papers, we're talking agenda item 10, 11 and 13. We'll take those as a block in sequence. So we'll start off with Ian. You're coming forward for 10, and we'd like to welcome Dr. Nick Jones. You've got a compatriot as well, or just you? Masked up, Lone Ranger.
Nick, come on up. I think we'll do this all combined if you're happy to.
You come forward, please.
Zoom him in.
You want to zoom from the back, or?
Which paper you're on now?
On
On the block or one? Which one are we doing?
Paper 10.
Paper 10. Who's looking at my...
So it's a financial report.
And resurgence planning too. So look, the intention was to give you a bit of an update of where we've got to looking backwards on the COVID response, but also looking forwards with respect to resurgence planning. And obviously, Dr. Jones, on behalf of the DHB, can provide some commentary in relation to the public health preparedness work around resurgence, as well as the civil defence effort as well. So
I have got a little presentation if you wanted to throw that on.
Who's there? Ian, you want to speak to
Yeah,
your paper?
so basically the two papers that are attached to my covering paper went to the joint committee, which is Councillor Barker and Chairman Rex are on, and so that went to their meeting on Monday. So those two papers really are just for your information, and if there's any questions. Overall, I think in the past, I think I came to this table and talked about the effectiveness of the response and gave you some facts and figures and all the rest of it. I think that where we've come out financially shows that it was also pretty efficient, considering we were in a national declaration for the whole region being locked down. So all in all, I think it went pretty well. So, but any questions?
Great. Thanks, Ian. Just in consideration of the financials there, we'll just get that out of the way. Councillor Foss has got a bit of an inquiry. Councillor Evans.
Thanks. Just a quick question, maybe coded incorrectly or something, but in the financials there it says consultancy costs 35k under budget. You budgeted 45k. But who are we kind of consulting with in the middle of this crisis, or is it closer to contracting or something?
It's contracting, yeah. So basically, we had some ex-staff members that we brought on board to help, and we did that at a contracting rate, quite a good contracting rate. So that's really what that money is for.
It wasn't someone with a, I don't know.
No, we weren't
flash
getting
suit telling us how to do
consultants as such. No.
Okay.
Yep.
Nothing.
I've got a
Mr. Eden.
question. It's just around 24, and there's further work started in developing a more deliberate approach to work with Tangata across the 4 Rs in the emergency management.
Yep.
And I'm aware that our marae and Wahuri I'm talking about, their response when it first started, and then, yeah, obviously, and we're sending some questions through, the Taiwhenua through, in response to what's been happening in that now. But yeah, I'm just wondering around that coordination moving forward, if that was to, because obviously all our marae's in Ahuriri I'm talking about and Wairoa, they didn't form part of that process, so that was a step that they took. How is that going to fit into the new plan?
Yeah, so in terms of the resurgence planning, we're working with Te Hei Māori Ora, and obviously they have that's part of the Taiwhenua's feed into that, and various marae and PSGs as well. So that's the vehicle that we're using at the moment, but we've also got Ngāhiwi, I think we've got the Chief Executive of Ngāti Kānunu, plus I think the chairs of the Taiwhenuas as well on the regional leadership group. So we've been meeting at this stage once a week by Zoom, and obviously Councillor Barker chairs that. So that's how it's working at the moment, but I think there is a bigger piece that we want to look at. It's just a matter of finding the time and space for that. Obviously, we're still at level 2, we've still got some work ongoing, but there is a bigger piece around the partnership with iwi moving forward in emergency management. Yeah.
Quickly come back to Councillor Foss.
Just briefly,
on the
sorry,
financials.
just to flag it though. So you've come in under or overspent, but you had some reserves and all those things as a smaller residual. It's just the forecast spending for the next year or something, in and around those parameters, because if something was to happen again,
Yep.
obviously, you know, I think everyone would put their hands up, but if we could just have a bit more substance around, from what you've learned, the budget this year, to make sure that we build up those residual funds.
Yep, sure. So an extra resolution that was added to one of the papers was for me to come back to the joint committee with a paper around forecasts for the future, and also looking at how we could reconstitute the reserve that we've got. I think looking forward, we will probably we're only into sort of the first month of the budget, so it's pretty hard to predict where we're going to go, but based on previous experience and based on the fact that we're not going to have the same work program moving forward, there's likely to be some under expenditure again moving forward. So
Thanks. Look forward to that report.
Councillor Ormsby.
I'll just start with a financial question. I just want to understand better our relationship when we declare an emergency and I suppose the relationship with central government and how they help fund us through the response for both COVID and the drought. Yep.
Sure. So, well, drought you've just had, and obviously MPI put some money into the money that you've been distributing. With regards to COVID, we have claimed almost $1 million back from central government in terms of the welfare costs. So they fund us for the cost of providing emergency welfare for people. So that's food, accommodation, clothing, those sorts of things.
They fund 100% of that?
Essentially, yes.
Yep.
Okay. And they went further in this COVID response. We were funding food banks as well, which is not part of the normal sort of funding arrangements for an emergency. So we did that as well. And that involved funding for people like Te Hei Māori Ora and some of the Tai whenua who were running food banks as well.
So when you reflect on the overspending, I mean, what levers can be pulled to be able to reclaim some of that from central government?
Basically what I've explained,
okay.
Operational costs, we can't claim back.
And
from
those are
central
pretty
government.
well hard ring-free.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. No, that's it. Thanks.
Look, thank you. I think we just need to, Nick, you could indulge us for a moment. We'll
Yeah,
get the paperwork out of the way.
Sure.
Because I think Councillor Barker needs to move these recommendations, if you don't mind, Councillor.
moved, Chair. We help you again.
Just before you complete that, though, I just want a comment from Jess around the fourth recommendation as to the consequence for the reserve account in making that, agreeing to that recommendation.
So I think that it would be acceptable to operate without a substantial reserve, given that the Hawkesbury Regional Council does have a $5 million BNZ facility that we can call on overnight, but it might be prudent of Council to make a formal decision that in the case of an event that we could utilise that facility without having to come back to Council for any sort of formal approval.
You got that?
Sure. I mean, the problem we've got here is that we had a small reserve, we've spent it, we've got a bit of a deficit. We've never had a reserve before, we now don't have one, we have a deficit. And it would be just nice to have some money in the bank in case we need it. But the issue here for this council is all very well for the other councils to say, that's it. But it's the regional council, this council, who has to rate for it. So we have to carry the can for this. And the chairman at the meeting was reluctant to agree to that, understandably. So we haven't. What we're going to do is have a paper come back that examines the issues and looks at it and have a thoughtful approach to it, knowing that we would get the support of the council should we choose to do so. On the other hand, as Chairman Rex pointed out, if something happened, we'd just get the checkbooks out and do what had to be done, which is kind of what Jess is saying. So
Yep.
I feel pretty comfortable with
that. Well done, Councillor Graham. I'm delighted to hear that. You're seconding that motion, by the way.
I will second the motion.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further comment?
The only thing I'd say about this is that we've looked at the costs, but there has been, in my view, a significant benefit of this. Without having a massive earthquake and all that goes with that, or a tsunami, those normal sorts of damages, we've been able to run the civil defence apparatus pretty hard over a long period of time. It's drawn in a whole pile of numerous number of other people come in to get experience of this. And we've built our capability considerably in a way we would not have been able to do by having normal exercises. The one thing I feel we do need to do is to make sure that we capture that advantage, that gain that we've had, nurture it and secure it for the future, because we are now in the best position civil defence has been in Hawke's Bay ever, in my view, with capability and talent to be able to do the work. We've never been this good.
Thank you. Any comment, Councillor Graham?
I would just endorse that and say that we did a fantastic job, and I think one of the best decisions that we made was to put Rick in charge of that from a governance level, and he worked really closely with Ian and rode his bicycle all around town, as I've said before. We do have a deficit, but over the last 3 years, it might even be 2 years, Ian has diligently built up, collected that surplus by really studiously managing his accounts. There's no reason he won't do that again. And if we have another disaster, which we are likely, it's probably a probability, not a possibility, with COVID, comes back and hits us again somehow, then we will have to talk to Jess about her 5 million on call in the bank. But it's no point in putting it in here.
Okay. Look, are there any other comments from around the room? Just one. Do you have a patron? Should we look to Councillor Barker being the patron of CDM?
We don't need to give Councillor Barker any more jobs.
So we've got 5 recommendations there. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those again will say no. That's carried, and thank you for your indulgence. We now move to paper 10, item 10, and that's the resurgence planning and future work. And I think most importantly, you're here to help us with that, Dr. Jones. So if you can
Happy to
roll out with
proceed.
your presentation.
Yeah, this was very quickly put together, just a few interesting slides on what's going on currently around the country. But before we start on that, in terms of upsurge, we have for some time in the public health team been preparing for an upsurge of up to probably 500 cases a day occurring in Hawke's Bay. That's the worst case scenario. Sorry, 500 tests being done a day, not 500 cases. That would be more like 10 cases a day. Yeah. And part of that has been about trying to streamline our testing facilities, get the processes of getting the samples to the laboratories working better. And as we saw recently, as soon as we get a big bump, there's some delays in getting that whole thing working. So we're trying to improve that process. Alongside that, I think preparations obviously for managing increased numbers of cases and potential outbreaks in rest homes, which we've seen around the world as being devastating. Also work going on in the hospital in terms of how we can turn that back into a facility that can deal with lots of cases of COVID. And I think probably the big thing that's changed between now and March is the expectation that we try as far as possible to respond and eliminate outbreaks without crippling our economy. And as everyone's aware, we've brought Auckland back into level 2 or 2.5 without having fully eliminated any further transmission. The rationale there is because all of the cases outside of the managed isolation facilities are all linked epidemiologically to another person in that cluster. In other words, they're all people who we knew about. They were contacts of a person who had the disease. We've had them tested and they've come back positive, which suggests that the current approach is actually working in terms of containing the outbreak. But as you'll see from this chart behind me, this is I think it's up to yesterday. There's still cases going on in Auckland, but these are all still linked to the current cluster. So what does that mean for us? It means we are in level 2. It means we're not in level 1. And hence, that's why I'm wearing a mask. It's totally voluntary at this stage, but the rationale with masks, of course, is that it stops me from infecting you. It's not for my protection. Okay, we'll just whisk along. Oh, this is just a quick glimpse of some of the dashboards. And what's happening in Auckland is they've had a number of sub-clusters within it. So they're associated with events, churches, events, employment, employers and so on. So they're doing some very good work there, actually doing a lot of detective work and following those up, and most of those are now coming to a close. I want to talk a little bit about the testing we've been doing. So this is just most recent testing in Hawke's Bay. The numbers have gone up again, although they're starting to drop away again. And there's some variation in where the testing is taking place. This is since we started these charts, but actually Flaxmere has had the highest testing rate in Hawke's Bay, and lower rates, particularly in central Hawke's Bay and to some degree Wairoa. This is a cumulative chart showing the testing rates for different people, and obviously with Pacific, with the predominance of the Pacific population in Auckland with the current cluster that has probably driven Pacific peoples here in Hawke's Bay to seek testing. This just shows that actually one of my concerns is that there's relatively low rates of testing amongst older people, the 80s or 70 plus really, and I would like to see more people in that age group getting tested. That just shows the rate by district. This is interesting. This is the weekly testing rate. Women more than men, but most interestingly is you'll see these three peaks. This was when we did a lot of testing of asymptomatic people to make sure that there was no community transmission. This is when 2 women left the managed isolation facility and went to Wellington and got tested. And this is when the outbreak started. So you'll see a lot of what's driving the testing and the request for testing is actually media and events that are taking place perhaps somewhere else in the country and people responding by wanting to get a test. And that's the rate by ethnicity. A big increase in Pacific testing when the outbreak first started.
Sorry, Nick, Dr. Nick, is that in Hawke's? That's in Hawke's Bay.
This is all Hawke's Bay data, yeah.
Yeah.
So there is some disparity there by ethnic group. We would like to see more testing among Māori and Asian. So we are going to be doing some communications around that. And this is the by district, Central Hawke's Bay. Wairoa's there at the bottom at the moment, the lowest testing rate, so we've got work to do there. This just shows Healthline calls. So one of the things we do get is weekly information about the number of people calling Healthline, and this shows similar peaks. Again, we're slightly lower than the national rates, but same pattern. And this data actually comes from GPs who collect information electronically on whether you've got a flu-like illness when you go to see them. And you can see that actually the rates of influenza-like illness are very low at the moment. This is per 100,000 practice population, so very, very low numbers.
Is that a surprise this time of the year?
It's certainly very atypical this year. I don't believe we've had a single positive influenza in Hawke's Bay this year. And that's no doubt the result of 1, very high uptake of flu vaccine, but 2, probably most importantly, we closed the borders. So there's no one bringing the virus in.
Better hygiene?
A better hygiene would be contributing as well, and social distancing.
And Nick, what's driving the people to test, the older people aren't going in and being tested?
I don't know. That's a good question.
You told them to stay at home.
Maybe, yeah. One of the things we're trying to do at the moment is all the residential facilities actually get the staff to start collecting the swabs from the residents who've got symptoms. So they don't actually have to go to the testing facility. The biggest risk is actually the workers in those facilities who take it in. Yeah.
Another question. So at this stage, only if you show symptoms you can get a test? You can't just rock up to a testing station?
That is correct. At the moment, the government's recommendations are for anyone with symptoms to be tested, and the only people who are getting tested without symptoms at the moment are the port workers. And there will be an order coming in soon which will also require any crew coming ashore for shore leave are going to have to be tested before they come in. We've already started doing that anyway.
It's still a risk, isn't it, Nick? I don't to interrupt, but in your paper here, people board a flight, they got tested before they boarded, and 2 days later they've got it. So it's still a huge risk, isn't it?
Yeah, so anyone coming into the country has to go through a 14-day period of isolation, and they are tested twice during that time period, once on the 3rd day and once on the last day. So the chances of someone being positive after that are vanishingly remote.
But what about a person off a ship?
A person on a ship is required to have 14 days after they leave the port, and no changes to the crew, and no illness aboard the crew, and they are required to have 14 days before they can come ashore.
They're treated as the same as someone flying in a
Yeah,
plane.
essentially.
No different.
Essentially.
Just because they come by ship,
Yeah,
no different.
yeah. There is a lower risk in that setting, and there was previously a requirement for them to have had 28 days since leaving another port. I think with the introduction of testing for all the crew, it'll be made consistent with the requirements for people coming into the country through the airports.
Now, I've got a question from Councillor Lambert and then Councillor
Charles.
Hey, Nick. Hey, just a quick one. Earlier in the COVID thing, I got a test and I didn't get any result at all. Are you giving
Got a
results
result.
now, and how fast are they?
That's disappointing to hear that.
Oh, it felt disappointing too.
That's what I was talking about, the process review of the whole testing process, because there have been events like what you've just told me. The test results should be getting back to you within 48 hours at the moment. That's the expectation. I have to say, though, that if it was positive, we would know within minutes of it being positive. So myself or Rachel, the medical officer of health, we're being informed of any positives, which there haven't been, of course, since the beginning of April.
Well, the other point is, like, the people we spoke to, once we tried to follow it up, they didn't have a clue what happened to our tests.
So it's the testing centre, wherever they took the sample, they are expected to call you with the result. That's the current arrangement. The result should also be going back to your usual GP. So I'm happy to follow that up for you if you wanted to find out what happened with that one, because we are trying to find out what any gaps in the system.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was like in the first month.
Thanks, Charles. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Now, your message, what should we be sharing with patrons of our bus service? Are they safe?
They're very
Encouraging to wear
safe.
masks
They're very
as
safe.
directed?
Yeah, I know it's very hard to get people onto the buses at the moment, and making them wear masks is possibly going to make it harder, but it does make it safer. The message at the moment in Hawke's Bay is there is no evidence of community transmission here in Hawke's Bay. Now, if we were to get cases here, then we might find ourselves back in level 3. But even then, I suspect the government will try to manage any other additional outbreaks in through a level 2 process. But so in terms of there is a mandatory requirement for face coverings on buses now. That is contained in the order that came into effect on the 29th, I think it was. So there is an expectation that our drivers will enforce that requirement.
My understanding, Dr. Jones, is that the drivers are not responsible for enforcing that. That is a police matter, but can you please clarify that?
It may in law be a police enforcement, but I believe that the drivers have been asked to, well, I think the drivers are entitled to deny passage to the person if they don't agree to wear a face covering.
Right.
Is that I think I read something about that, and they mentioned the drivers that it was a health and safety issue, and whether they are there to police that direction.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably be within their powers under health and safety and employment legislation.
It'd be good to get some clarity about that, because my advice is that the drivers are not responsible for enforcing that requirement. So
We can look into that for you if you want. I mean, that's really matter probably to bring up with police as to who's actually doing that enforcement. But
look, we need to rattle on a little bit. A quick question, a very rapid fire question from Councillor Foss and Councillor Barker.
Thank you. From a health perspective, I think obviously everyone's much more vigilant now and aware and cautious. But from a health perspective, do you think we've been a bit complacent in that, particularly outside of Auckland or here in the Bay? I guess we've been very fortunate. We had a serious issue very early on with the cruise ship. Now things seem to be relatively calm. Or do you think that we're in relatively the right position, or
it's hard to know, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think the best approach is to be cautious and prudent, but not be alarmist. And that's the danger. We walk a fine line between people getting panicky and sort of overly concerned about things and actually being prudent. I think I would support, the work that Ian's doing around readiness for an upsurge, and not necessarily relying on the fact that there will be, lockdowns, and that we will be potentially trying to operate in a more maintain our economy, but using much more, using things like masking and social distancing, and to be able to maintain our economy while we're getting back on top of it.
So Polly.
The initial graph you had of the total cases each day, did that include the positives in isolation from travelling in?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Because they're not really relevant to what's happening in the community.
No.
Yeah.
Look, we do need to move on. This is fascinating stuff. It's really, really interesting. I understand you've got a question, Councillor Barker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm waiting for you to call me. I appreciate it.
You snooze, you lose.
And I had my hand up, and I was waiting, and you called me, but you didn't come back to it. Doctor, I'm really interested in your opinion on the vexed question of the start of this latest cluster in Auckland. It seems to just appeared in the community. We've not been able to have any links to it. What is your opinion of where it came from? Did it come from Mars? Was it sent here by courier post? I mean, how did it arrive? It just can't have arrived by itself, can it?
No, well, there's the three theories, I think. One is that it's come in via someone who's returned from overseas, and there is an unidentified link or two between someone who's come in. We've just not managed to identify who that person was, and then they subsequently had some contact with that initial worker in the Americold or wherever it was. The other theory is that it has come in via a frozen good, or that the virus could survive on a frozen object. And that hasn't, there's been no support for that because the tests that have been done have not identified any contamination within the environment. I guess actually those are really only the two theories. You could potentially have other scenarios where perhaps a person has walked into a facility where there's been some coughing, and maybe they breathe the air in. There is this remote but less common but possible droplet spread, which is where if you're in a very tight confined room, coughing, the droplets can be suspended in the air and remain in there for a while, particularly if it's closed off. So I guess that would be my sort of outside third possibility as being a possible way in which that could have occurred. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that the Ministry of Health has been trying to do is they're going back and checking the actual whole genome sequence of every virus, every positive case that has come into the country. And as yet, they have still not managed to find a single one that matches that first one.
Miracle one.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
One final question from
Supplementary, there's been a lot of talk about our contact tracing system. Are you satisfied that our contract tracing system has the capability required to meet an outbreak here in Hawke's Bay?
Yes. Yeah. We well, of course, it depends how big it gets, but because we have now established a national process, we can delegate. If we get inundated and we don't have sufficient staff, we can delegate some of the work to another public health unit in another part of the country. And we have now a single system which all the public health units can see what's going on across the country.
That's excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Ormsby.
Are we at the stage of moving item 10?
Yes, we're very much very close to that point. I did want to make this point, Dr. Jones. I would like to thank you for, I think the word should be the bravery you showed around the Ruby Princess. Unfortunately, you weren't able to head that off, but reading between the lines and the tea leaves there, your efforts were exemplary in trying to prevent that happening. I think there's a question in here that's something like, what can we do? You know, can we go and barricade the port to help you in your job to make sure that that nonsense doesn't happen again?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it is obviously very disappointing not to have stopped that vessel, but we did try everything possible. And obviously the situation now, I think, would be very different if cruise ships were ever to be reconsidered to be coming into New Zealand ports. There will be some very, very different approaches taken.
We've got a mover. Thank you for that. That's a wonderful presentation. We've got Councillor Ormsby's moving. Councillor Foss is seconding. Would you like to comment, Councillor?
Yeah, I would. I know we didn't get into the deep discussion around the resurgent planning and future work program. But I would like to note that, you know, in terms of the Welfare Coordination Group, which is on page 254, that there are some real concerns about our isolated groups that maybe we haven't captured well during COVID, and that our steps moving forward, we look at addressing some of those gaps. I'm not quite sure what they are and what the shape of them are, but I would like to see us moving forward looking at helping those isolated communities and groups like the migrants, visitors, backpackers, RSC, who in those times need that welfare support.
Councillor Foss?
Thanks very much for the presentation, but actually more importantly, I'm sure I speak for my colleagues, please I'll pass on thanks to you and your team, all of your team, for helping keeping us safe and through this period and however it plays out. But we know everyone's gone above and beyond, and it's absolutely appreciated and noted. So thank you.
Any other comments? Before offering Councillor Ormsby the opportunity, I'd like to make these observations. When we set off in our early days in March, when we were considering our CDM response, one of the comments made was we should stick to our lane. I've reflected on that and believe that we're actually in the same lane. That what we've learnt over that time is that this council and the CDM response is a huge opportunity to collectively work with the District Health Board in many aspects, the networks that we can offer. I think even the support that we can offer in terms of contact tracing, intel opportunities. So I'd like the resurgence plan of future working program to actually reflect a fully joined up connection with the District Health Board, even to the extent of what investments and resourcing is needed from your end that you may not be able to access, that we can, because your problem is our problem, and we need to really join ourselves together on that. So I think we've done a wonderful job. The graphs show that we're doing well now, but the world has changed, and we need to change with it. So, Councillor Ormsby.
Thank you. Thank you to you all. Yep.
Yeah. So the resolution is to receive the resurgence plan, endorsing it, and so all those in favour of that will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That is carried. That's probably it.
Okay, well, in terms of what you've just, your offer, I will take that back to the DHB, and certainly I will talk with Ian about combining our resurgence planning. I think that's positive. Yeah, right.
Where we are.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now I just take some guidance from council. I don't know if lunch has arrived yet or anything.
So, no. So lunch is at 1. So we've still got another 20 plus minutes. Can I suggest that we finish the COVID items? So we've got Sarah here on the regional recovery, and we can quickly run through our business continuity plan review. That'll just take a couple of minutes, and we may get time before lunch, if we get through those quickly, to jump to the cycleways.
A long time to lunch.
20 minutes.
You're having a shocker chair. Chaos at the top table there.
Look, so we're agenda item
So go to 10?
10.
Yep. So Jess can quickly...
We're finished.
No, we're not.
Sorry, 11.
11, yeah.
I thought we were up to 11.
Sarah, you might as well come on up
Yeah,
now.
so we'll quickly cover off item 11 while Sarah's getting
This
organised.
chairman will be with that.
Enough from you, Councillor Barker.
So this paper is an update on the interim review, or an interim update on the review that's taking place internally, just particularly around how well we responded during the lockdown as we operated under our BCP plan. So it's generally good practice that when you operate under that plan that you'll look back and review lessons learnt, take into account what worked well and what didn't. We've done some of the work already in terms of surveying staff, particularly around communication worked well during the lockdown. I think we're relatively lucky in some respects that it was sort of a slow, steady response. We know that had it been a sudden event, our disaster recovery potentially wouldn't have operated as well if it had been an earthquake or a tsunami. So that's certainly something that we're looking at now, acknowledging that we had a bit of forewarning, so we had time to plan to get everybody out of the office. So that review's taking place. The paper just outlines some elements of what we're looking at, and that will come back to the November Finance Audit and Risk Committee, and then through to the committee, Corporate and Strategic Committee thereafter.
Yeah, look, I would note from the internal review that overall the internal view was that we did very well across a range of metrics, and that'll be reported through more fully. But you've got the overall sort of staff confidence, and they're a pretty good barometer, I have to say. Staff are reasonably quick to tell us if our processes are not good, if our technology is not good, if we hadn't handled the situation well. But in terms of the way we communicated, connected, enabled work to continue, certainly the view was that it was pretty seamless.
Look, we're just looking to get the visuals up, so we'll take Councillor Barker can fill the space, I'm sure.
One of the things that we did differently this time was having staff work remotely. And I just wonder if, in fact, the council is preparing to make sure that's a much more available option in the future, that we're more set up for it. I know that some government agencies still aren't able to operate remotely yet, surprisingly, but are we doing that? And secondly, following that, are we proposing to have make more available for staff to work from home and work remotely as a consequence of this? And thirdly, are we looking to do more of, because travel was banned, we did a lot of work via Zoom, are we looking to make sure that having electronic communication is the priority, and that the default position is to get on a plane and fly?
So, look, yes, yesterday the executive leadership team yesterday signed off on a flexible working policy that will be released to staff on Friday, and that outlines the procedures around staff working from home, and so we're looking to promote that to the extent that can be accommodated within the working of the business. It's important that we continue to ensure that there's good team cohesion within teams, and that people feel well supported, and that we cover health and safety issues in the home and those sort of things. So there's been a lot of work put into an extensive framework, a whole bunch of policies, procedures, etc., and that rolls out as of Friday. In terms of travel, yes, the preference is still to use electronic means for meetings, and we're seeing much more of the national engagement that we would normally have done by air travel now happening via Zoom, and that is the default. So air travel's right down for the organisation.
Long way to continue.
You would have seen that from the organisational performance report, right?
I realise that. I'm just seeking for him to confirm it, so we've got it in the public arena. Highlight it. We're watching this. It's not going to happen by default.
Look, I'll come to you shortly. So
follow your policy also asking.
I'd like to come back to you. I don't know if you've been in front of us before, Sarah, have you?
Not formally.
Can we just have a quick intro from the Chief Executive and yourself, please? Because
just before we do, can I just cover off? We covered off on business continuity. So that was item 11.
I have one question.
I knew I'd read it. See?
Just before you go to item 13.
I did have a question on 11.6.
Sorry?
I had a question on paragraph 11.6 of this report.
Yep.
Just the tensions between staff and inequitable workloads and that sort of thing. What's the take forward for I guess addressing that for quote next time? Is it possible?
Look, some of it was inherent in what was a messy situation, but I think we've got more practiced now, if you like, at working remotely and having the disruption. So I would anticipate if we have to go into another lockdown, that the orderly management of priorities and workflows will be much more manageable than they were in a situation which was, unprecedented and unfolding as it went along. So I think we've got a better handle on that.
Right.
And also I think in terms of the staffing of a lot of the pressure came from the unknowns and a view that we need to throw everything plus the kitchen sink at the regional welfare response. Yeah. And I think in hindsight we overstaffed it, and that was better to be overstaffed than understaffed. And one of the things which has been recognised is we ran a double shift at the Group Coordination Centre, and in hindsight the view is we could have quite adequately provided the response we did with a single shift, just working within normal business hours. So next time I think we wouldn't have the same call on staffing from across councils as we did for the first event. So we've learned an awful lot. We're getting a lot better at doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor.
I just want to acknowledge some of these high percentages within this paper, and how well the managers must have worked with their teams to get such a high response. One is staff consistently rated HBRC's response positive, greater than 80% across all survey areas, and the other one was staff scored the effectiveness of internal communication as 88% positive. So this is just a big mihi to the managers and the teams that they manage really well and work effectively and collaboratively. So yeah, that's really encouraging to see. So thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor.
James, you just kind of announced a refreshment of a new policy, which I thought would have normally come back up and be signed off around this table. For something like health and safety policy, procurement policy, all comes here. Maybe it's a bit more operational than those. But noting that a few of us expressed strong interest in the accommodation options available to us.
Yep.
And the core of what you just said there was not working on in a particular or the traditional method. So regardless if it compelled or not, be very interested to see that policy and learn a bit more about the future thinking around it.
Sure. So we do have a reasonably large number of staff policies that we typically don't bring to council because they are operational, but this one is feeding into the accommodation review. And so we've been undertaking a stock take of floor space and desk utilisation recently that's feeding into a rethink on accommodation, which we will be bringing back maybe to the next CNS.
If not earlier through an LTP workshop, in terms of
just as a live issue.
Yep.
It will drive a lot of other discussions in the financial sense.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
It shouldn't go to the Finance Audit and Risk Committee though, it'll just get bogged down there.
The workload, we can take it, big shoulders.
Are there any other comments or questions in regard to this? So we've got a recommendation that we receive this internal response review. Got a mover there, Charlie, is that you?
Yeah, of course it is.
Moved by Councillor Lambert.
Don't cough, mate.
Seconded by Councillor Williams. All those in favour of receiving the report will say aye. Those against will say no.
Aye. I don't wish to speak.
Well, that's, sorry, Mike. Catch me again. Look,
Cut off too. I thought it was just me who was cutting off.
Let's move on to item 13, and I'll go where I started before. Sarah, the Chief Executive is going to introduce you, and then we'll get some comment from yourself about your entire history, please, would be good.
So Sarah's met some of councillors, but possibly not others in the room. So Sarah's been in the job, 5 weeks now, I'm going to guess, about that. So Sarah was appointed as our Regional Recovery Manager. Sarah is funded by the 5 councils in Hawke's Bay. So she's hosted by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, but she works to the 5 Chief Executives. We have a number of roles in the region that operate like that, so jointly funded, and her role is to coordinate the whole of local government effort around regional recovery, COVID recovery. She's on a fixed term contract for a year, so that's the context. And Sarah's really been getting her feet under the desk in recent weeks, and today was going to give a bit of an update on where she's getting to.
Oh, kia ora koutou. It's good to be here. Noting I'm holding you back from lunch, very quick from me. I have recently relocated back to Hawke's Bay, born and bred here. Been in Wellington a number of years, and from a career perspective, most of that time at Deloitte, mainly in the finance and consulting sector, specialising more in the last 3 years or so in iwi post-settlement work, as well as primary sector business cases, feasibility, that sort of thing. So happy to be here and giving you an update today. So really, purpose and summary of this was 6 weeks in, a bit of an update on some key impacts, where we're at, some of the recovery activities and things that are going on across council and outside, and the planning that's in place. So very quickly, recovery, a word we're all very used to hearing now, along with the one unprecedented, I think. So it is the final part of managing our emergency, but the big difference here from an earthquake or flood is both COVID and drought could well be going on for the foreseeable future. So recovery planning and actions kind of can't get too far ahead, that it doesn't allow us to come in and out of response, and that's something I think we've very much learned from the first response. We were a bit slow off the mark given the nature of, I guess, the disaster, and will be very much run in parallel going forward. So resilience could be the 5th R. Again, given the nature, planning needs to be built within our community and economy, with the level of government support very likely to drop off if this is to continue for 2 years. How are we going to build resilience into our community and move forward? So the Hawke's Bay snapshot, you've got this in your pre-reading, I won't dwell on it too long. Notable mentions, I guess, manufacturing, agriculture and forestry, and owner-occupied businesses make up a huge portion of our labour market, and that's just something to be aware of, as well as our huge amount of high self-employment rates and business makeups of 0 to 5 employees. So they do require a lot more support than maybe some larger businesses that have quite a lot of cash reserves or build up of equity that can get them through times like this. We've got an ageing population, but also a large portion of rangatahi, 42% of these are Māori, and something we need to be taking them along our journey in terms of recovery and response. So our impact, at the time of writing this, 1,752 cases, so we're now at 1,752 cases, so we've gone up a bit, and globally, virus isn't showing any signs of slowing down. Throughout our response, we've had 330 million of wage subsidies paid across the region. 52% of all unique jobs across our region were covered by that subsidy in the first wave, 10% in the extension. Job seekers, so our work-ready job seekers, are up 58% versus this time last year, and there's a significant increase in income relief payments, so you'll see the 90% there, accommodation supplement support and special food grants, and so that is from June to July, not necessarily even year on year, which is a bit concerning given July was quite a good month. I'd be expecting to see a bigger rise in August given we went into a resurgence. Story here really is we have a better outlook than some, which I'll get to, but we need to make sure we don't leave anyone behind on this journey. Drought, I think we've all heard today, 2020 hit us pretty hard. We actually, that 177 is now 187 in terms of number of feed transport assistance that's been given. 333 small lifestyle block feed run recipients and 143 requesting feed budgeting assistance from beef and lamb. So although it's a North Island event, Hawke's Bay made up 70% of this, the total cases. So flow on impacts, a dry winter, all the uncertainty still pretty high there. MPI, I understand, is conducting an impact report that will hopefully give us a bit more insight in terms of the actual economic impact to our region on that. It's quite hard to judge that without some numbers. Very quickly, I'll just summarise here. So our Hawke's Bay GDP, we are contracting as expected, but we're weathering the storm somewhat better than some. Latest update around a 1% annual decline versus 2.1% nationally. So our tourism spend's down, but our retail transactions up. So we're buying local, we're spending local, but everyone's got the whole feeling of how long will this last. Businesses are taking all the support they can. There's a huge amount through our regional business partner program. And the Hawke's Bay Chamber kindly gave us their latest survey data that shows, not worth noting pre-resurgence, but about 50% of businesses post-COVID are operating at full capacity, and a very high proportion of them now looking at how they do business better. Do we need to go online? Do we need to adapt to this new normal and come out the other end? So the outlook, I mean, the economic one's not great, but it always hasn't been as bleak as they make out, especially for Hawke's Bay. I think the main thing for us is we need to be wary and bring everyone along in our journey in terms of the social recovery as well. We're an attractive destination regardless of our overseas visitors, but we aren't solely dependent on that, which is great. We've got good diversity in our GDP contributions, and a good percentage of our labour workforce is able to work throughout alert levels. We are essential. Food and fibre and construction is a huge part at the moment of our recovery, and we really need to understand their barriers and issues, and that's been raised through the recovery planning that I've seen. This slide really was just a bit of a snapshot to show how much funding and work we've got coming into the region. It's almost a bit of a scary sight in terms of how we're going to achieve it, but this is a problem, and this is something that regionally we need to collaborate on. And you'll see there 338 million into the region just from government PGF in 2019 and 2020 annual year. A great next step is really
If I just interrupt,
Sorry.
on top of all that, are we still building the 2 hotels and the new hospital?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the private projects, the known ones are going ahead.
Private funded.
Yeah.
Oh, they got money, all right, those surgeons.
Yeah.
Oh, so,
so this is, yeah,
are
it
we,
is just...
I mean, haven't enough builders, have we? Or plumbers, I dare say?
Yeah. No, we're
Serious husband's a plumber.
we're busy, so I think yeah, it's something. I think the construction sector was very tapped heading into COVID. Nothing's changed. It's really now about workforce planning, procurement strategies, thinking about that, not tripping over each other, and bringing all of that together, which is something that the recovery plan needs to take into account.
So on the workforce thing, the construction sector, is the construction sector working hard to get enough apprentices on board? It seems to me this is the ideal time to train people. They've been very reluctant starters in this the last 2 decades.
Yeah, I think they've changed.
Yeah, I think MSD is working closely with that group, and it is a key action from that Matariki table around if we've got 2 or 3 things to focus on, what is it? And that is one is supporting that sector to bring all that together and link those workforce training and development needs, because you're right, now's the time. And I think given if we go back to that makeup of a lot of our businesses and a lot of our construction businesses being 0 to 5 employees, not having a lot of cash reserves and taking on new apprentices in a time like this isn't so attractive, so we need to make it more attractive for them.
But it always was. Building the street all for this dawn of time right here, it's always been small businesses.
Yeah.
Always managed to do it then. Why do they find it hard now?
Uncertainty of being able to give them work, I guess. I can only speak from our case, but...
They frustrate me.
Yeah.
Jeff, I dare say we've got up there, the biggest challenge to our economy is RSEs for horticulture and viticulture. If we don't get them, we are shot.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we get understand how our key sectors are doing, and this is happening across a few different channels, but from what I'm hearing, RSC, absolutely, but the industry are working together. They've got a plan and they're working with council where they need support.
And just the demographic, you said with Māori, obviously Arangatahi are coming through, and that's going to be the new workforce within Hawke's Bay to meet that need. So if we're talking about building apprenticeships and that, and maybe that's a focus or change in focus in business within the Hawke's Bay, the new workforce is going to be young Māori coming through to fill that demographic. And I think there's been calculations done. There's a period where I suppose our mature people are moving out, and then rangatahi or Māori youth are coming through to fill that gap. That would be correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So change in business, I mean, obviously businesses have got to look to Māori potentially providing that workforce.
Councillor Foss.
Excuse me, just back to your previous slide. I'm just trying to reconcile the government funding by category. And you've got the largest items, capital projects, presuming they're things that may return some kind of investment over time, or I guess.
No.
Well, could you define that, and then why wouldn't water be a capital project? Because the sum of those is like 100 and nearly 200, I think, versus the 300. Sure. So is that just the year, or?
So that was just a quick analysis to try and break away the more feasibility business case stuff from actual. I've kind of lumped anything that didn't have a key area as capital, in terms of it will actually be work and create something and create jobs. The water one is a mix.
So that's how you've defined it, so I'm right?
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm right. Okay.
The water one is a mix of a review as well. Yep.
Next. Keep on trucking there, Sarah.
I'll quickly just run through here. I mean, from a pastoral, viticulture, I think they've got the same RSC issue looming ahead. They've had mixed impact depending on their consumer market. Pastoral has been discussed a lot today already, but I understand a resilience strategy is underway, which will have a big part of their recovery. Tourism, there's always going to be businesses who are very focused on cruise ship visitors or overseas visitors that won't succeed in a time like this, but in general they're used to adjusting. Hawke's Bay Tourism's doing a fantastic job, and domestic visitors at the moment are softening that blow. The 700k has been very welcome for them, and I understand Hamish will give you a bit more of a briefing on that at your next meeting. Businesses have really good support in terms of our SME businesses mainly. There's a lot out there, events being run, and for them it's assessing a new normal really and moving forward with how they're going to operate.
Question, Sarah, when you say Hawke's Bay Airport down 32%, is that down to 30%, 32%, or down by 32%?
Passenger numbers.
Yeah.
Down 32%.
Down.
What period?
This time last year.
6% or something, 68 of last time, 32 down.
Yeah, that's not bad, really.
I thought I'm surprised that.
Yeah. Most of it's domestic. It's never been a big international.
Yeah.
I understand that, but the times I've been to the airport, it seemed like it's completely empty.
Yeah.
I was just stunned. We're still running at 68%. I just can't believe the change.
This was July.
That's last month.
So we'd expect August to be hit quite badly.
It was getting cranking again in July, collapsed in the last year.
Yeah, and that was supported when...
okay, thank you.
Yeah, by the Wellington.
Level 1.
Sarah, you've got a little bit to go.
I can pretty much wrap up now. So I guess just kind of honing in on Hawke's Bay Regional Council's recovery. From a high level Matariki focus, they are focusing on these areas we're talking about in terms of construction and the integrated planning and future workforce. So it is very much on the table there.
Just one quick question on the recovery and the analytics. And you talk a lot of government funding's gone into councils to do employment and that recovery. I suppose my question, are you monitoring, and I can give you an example, obviously part of that PGF and that there's opportunity for our rangatahi or Māori rangatahi to come through. So if there's 10 jobs going, are you, as part of the recovery plan, are you monitoring what the outcome is through employment?
Not currently, but something I can...
If you do, that would be great.
It is typically required in the contracts that we're getting through from Crown from various things, and Sarah's working very closely with Tash Romano, who's funded by TPK on behalf of Te Kahui Ohanga. So is a close collaboration around ensuring that with job creation we are placing as many rangatahi as we can, and obviously MSD as well as TPK are closely involved with the whole Matariki program. So yeah, a bit of work to do there in terms of the data collection and reporting, but it's absolutely embedded in the intent.
Any other questions there, Sarah? You pretty much done there?
Yeah, I mean, you've had this as pre, so if there's any
Sure,
questions.
yeah. Just one question from me then. You've scared the hell out of me with things are only going to get worse. Is there anything we can do beyond what you've scoped there in terms of our council activity to either accelerate any of our capital programs? Are we getting in the way in terms of consenting on wastewater discharges or anything like that we can look to accelerate to help things out? In other words, get out of the way if this development, if there's an issue there. Have you got any insights around that? Water security.
I wouldn't say there's anything as far as a barrier. I think the council's doing what they do well, even better, expanding that and driving projects forward fast is creating activity. It's just making sure we do it in a way that the quality stays up. In terms of forecast of getting worse, yes, that's everything we keep reading, but Hawke's Bay is in a good position if we get things right.
Thank you.
And look, perhaps if I just make the comment that you can see that there is $11 million worth of pending funding for the Regional Council across predators, fencing and water security. Those are all in contract negotiation stage at the moment. Our biggest problem with the accelerated flood control program as well is going to be spending all of that money because it's significant capital works and we're having to absorb the management of all of that largely within our existing workforce. So yeah, there's a lot to do to get what is nearly $30 million away of additional expenditure by this council in the region. So at the moment, we don't really need too much more on our plate.
Strike that from the record. Saying he's got more notes in his wallet than he can spend.
Well, that's the same with the whole region. The whole region.
Yeah,
we're over capacity. I mean, just to answer your point, Peter, we are going to have full employment plus. You know, we can do all the stats we want, but we are going, as long as we get the RSEs. If we don't get the RSEs, we'll collapse. If we do, we will have jobs galore.
Councillor Van Wyk.
Yeah, and I just want to back up what Rex is saying. The RSC is absolutely paramount. And so I don't know what we can do as a council, but we need to really put our thinking caps on to support those key sectors, horticulture, viticulture. Horticulture is kiwi fruit, is apples, and summer fruit, that we support them and actually working with government to actually open up the border somehow to actually bring these workers here from a safety perspective from ourselves, but also for the workers themselves as they're coming. Because RSC actually means more New Zealanders in work as well. If you can't pick your fruit, because that's where they are, and that's where they should be, they never should be in a pack house. But if you can't pick your fruit, you have got no work for pack house workers as well. And we've got lots of Kiwis who work in pack houses as well. So it's just a snowball effect. So we need to really keep our eye on that, and no doubt the chair will keep us all informed of where we can lend support.
Thank you.
And that's within reason, because obviously RSC overseas workers, and as long as opportunity is provided to New Zealanders to do that work. So I agree with what you're saying, Rex, but as long as the opportunity is provided for New Zealanders first, to meet the need if they can.
At that point, can Councillor Van Wyk move the recommendation to receive the report?
I move so.
And Councillor Barker seconding that, or is that a question?
Gratefully, thank you.
So moved and seconded. Any comments from you, Sheriff, about this?
Well, it's very positive reading through the report, and we possibly could have a lot more time spent on how good we are compared to the others, just to give ourselves a bit of a feel good. But I think we need to continue to work hard with our key industries and support them the best we can to get to the recovery where we think we are one of the best regions once again, and no doubt, and we heard a presentation this morning where we will be supportive of anything that comes our way to do that, to aid their recovery. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Barker.
Just to say thank you very much for the report, very thoughtful, I appreciate it very much, and it supports my sort of anecdotal view of how things are here locally. Unusual for me to go out and have a drink on a Friday night, unusual to go and have a meal out somewhere. But on the rare occasions I do of late, I note the place is packed.
Rare?
And the second thing I note also is that driving around Hastings, the number of cars and vehicles on the road has gone up significantly. The place is pumping. That's my impression of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Foss, you was
Just interested, as you you evolve your relationship with Matariki, very interested that those wheels are as turning and everything works as seamlessly, as agile and as innovatively as possible. And if I could assist in that front, or issues to bring to the fore, that would be really good for the sake of all of this for our region. We must move fast and to be able to spend and invest these funds. So if we can assist, or at least be made aware of any impediments to that, that would be really good, even between meetings.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one comment, I guess. Just how critical you said protecting ourselves as a food and fibre region and accelerating infrastructure projects. I go back to water security, and I can only hope, Mr. Chairman, that having previously voted for it, you would hope that we don't have to resurrect any zombies for the process, for the purpose.
That was a wonderful jab at the end. Thanks,
other,
Sarah. You've done a
any
wonderful
other
job, mate.
erudite comment coming forward? No. So we've got the recommendation. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. Thank you, Sarah. That's really great. Look, in your hands, is there any interest in going to the cycling issue, or do you want to have lunch? So we're having lunch, so we're adjourned.
Yeah,
Actually, there's
You get the union onto you, mate.
Yeah, well,